Hey. Time for another out of this world story from rSpace. Affair fog is a hell of a drug. I found out my 36 male fiance, 32 female, was having a prolonged affair about 8 months ago. Went no contact a couple of months after, but we had started a business when we were together, so that needed to be addressed. Resolving that has been an ongoing cluster F of increasingly erratic behavior on her part. It came to a head this Monday, when she showed up to the business landlord's place with her affair partner and demanded that the lease be transferred to her name. I got a call from my landlord, who was very upset, indicating that a random person showed up demanding the lease. The lease is in her business's name, and she is a member of the business as registered, but she showed up with zero documentation tying her to the business, zero documentation at all, and just insisted the lease be put in her name. She had never even met the landlord, but just expected that if she said the business was hers, the landlord would just hand her the lease for a location registered with the state as property of an LLC? The landlord told her no. She construed this to mean that I had prevented her from legally having any access to her business, so she, that same day, went to the business location and changed one of the locks, out of 3. When I asked her about this, she explained that she didn't want to lock me out, which she didn't, but was worried I would change the locks, so she got into the location and changed one lock.
So I could get my stuff out if you change the locks.
She left the old lock on a stand next to the door. I'm standing here, alone, inside the business. She only changed one lock, as I said. The others are still the same old. She didn't want to lock me out. Looking at her handiwork, at the lock she screwed into the door, next to which she had placed the original lock and all its hardware, asking myself, what effing happened to this woman with a master's degree? How did she not realize that if I could still get in the building, which she wanted me to be able to do, and if I was as evil as she imagined me to be, I could just unscrew her new lock and reinstall the previous lock that she left next to the door? She had a key to the lock she replaced, but a new lock that she also had a key to would make sure she had a key to this lock. This woman has a master's degree and is a published academic author. She changed one other lock. It was for a door between one part of the business and another, not an entrance. And even if it had locked me out of that part of the business, which it didn't, I would just have to walk around the building to the other entrance. The locking mechanism was still inside the main building, i.e., the part that she said she wanted me to have access to. I just looked at this random lock that had never existed before and unlocked it? Since she's agreed to relinquish the business in its entirety, thank God, and confirmed it in writing, so I'm pretty solid. But I'm still in awe of this incredibly educated woman losing the thread this badly. Our first reaction is from Antaru. Best description I got from my therapist at the time was, they revert back to a selfish teenager who believes the world revolves around them. I'm glad you got her to relinquish the business to you. I would still lawyer up just to be safe. Next response from Haskell Rules. The first clue I found that my ex was cheating on me was a notepad on her desk where she was practicing signing her name with the other guy's last name. I told my buddy about it, and he started cracking up laughing. Like a freaking teenager? Are you kidding me? He howled. Next response from Not Rick Deckard, 1982. Well, part of cheating is convincing yourself that the world revolves around you. I mean, you're getting attention from multiple people, so that must mean you are so awesome that you deserve it, right? And it goes that way for a while. It reinforces itself the longer they get away with it. My ex was the same way. We didn't have a business together, but she was baffled that my checks suddenly stopped going into our joint bank account when we separated. She was baffled again after our divorce was final that I didn't have to give her more money when she couldn't afford her own lawyer. Like, truly baffled. This is someone with a very high IQ, an undergrad degree, and a very high GPA. She honestly thought that because we were married once, I had to give her money literally forever if she demanded it. The OP responds, my ex was also very baffled by some very obvious facts. Our business is the kind of thing that involves some unique equipment, which I had taught myself to build at scale over the course of many years. Because it has become popular in recent years, to start the kind of business we had, lead time on new equipment is about 2 years, and the supply-demand mean the equipment is at the very least 5 times materials cost, often close to 10 times. She agreed at the outset that I would keep the equipment, on account of how I literally built it from scratch. It took a few months of her fighting over the rest of the business before she realized,
Oh wait, I need that thing, and it's going to be about $50,000, and 2 years before I can have it.
And now we aren't arguing about her keeping anything. We're finalizing the terms of her exit. Beautiful Dress 5657 chimes in. My cheating ex texted me,
You deleted my Amazon wish list. I had worked on that for years. Now it's gone.
on my Amazon account, after he threw away 13 years together to play around on Tinder with 20-year-olds. He was mad I changed the Netflix password. Hilarious. Nero Aldrin 20 thinks it's going to be hilarious when the affair fog lifts and it hits her of everything she did. One more insightful thought from Switchboard Friend. It was good of the landlord to tell you this. Quite often, businesses live and die by the quality of the landlord. I'd recommend a decent bottle of whiskey or tickets to an event for his efforts and further the good relations and reduce the damage done. Not quite sure what your ex was trying to pull here. If she wanted her stuff, then why not take it instead of spending an equal amount of time with a locksmith? I reckon she was trying to get all the locks changed, but something went wrong or she got cold feet from the legal implications during this process, which is why only one was done and the old lock was abandoned on site. Everyone's behavior makes sense to themselves. Your ex is an intelligent person. It's just a case of looking at her agency. She wanted to deny you access to the building. She tried and failed with the lease. The next natural step is to prevent physical entry. Her story doesn't make sense given her efforts with the landlord. She just needed some form of explanation, so lied by minimizing her actual plan. Something she is used to doing to you, and at this point, didn't really care if it was believable. She just needed to tell you something. At least with a fledgling business, you have something to help distract you, and I'm sure that in a few years' time, we'll see an update where you are explaining how you succeeded in spite of this trauma. I look forward to hearing how this was awful at the time, but you turned it around into the making of you. Edit. Her stuff might mean the expensive assets that the business depends on that she feels entitled to, not just the things you are expecting. Please protect the business legally and physically. I also reckon that while she has limited interest in a functioning business, she will be interested in selling off its assets. On to the next adventure. Justifying cheating because husband plays a lot of video games. I've noticed a trend of people justifying cheating or excusing it because the husband plays a lot of video games. It really bothers me because I played a lot of video games, and I really beat myself up about it when my wife cheated and left. In my situation, I was working full-time, and before the marriage ended, I was working 2 jobs, finally making enough money to get all the things we've always wanted. I'd spend about 2 hours a day with my kid and wife, and we'd go out for activities about twice a week on weekends. The rest I was either working or unwinding with computer time. She was the full-time parent. This is what we said we wanted early in our relationship, and we'd finally built up to it. Some people have told me I checked out of the marriage and that I was a horrible husband. I always provided for her to be able to be a full-time parent. That's what we both always wanted, was one of us to be able to stay home with the kid. I offered multiple times to switch roles if she wanted to work full-time while I take care of the kid, but she never wanted to. I never checked out. She did. I loved her intensely and was doing what I thought was best for the growth and security of our family. I would tell her I love her every time we talked. I would call her beautiful and thank her for everything she did. But because I played video games after working 2 jobs, apparently I'm a bad and neglectful husband. Some examples of comments I've seen. You checked out, so she looked for love elsewhere. Just move on. As if playing video games trivializes the cheating. You obviously don't care about her, so divorce is best for you. And on and on. I hate the stigma we have against husbands who play video games. As long as you are doing your part in the marriage, and as a father, there's nothing wrong with playing video games to unwind. For some reason, it's socially acceptable to scroll Facebook or TikTok all day, but video games suddenly makes you a bad partner. F that. And F people who justify betrayal because of someone's particular hobby. Our first response is from Intelligent Help 8946. Anyone that justifies cheating is scum in my opinion. It takes 2 to make a relationship work. If a spouse is unhappy with the amount of time their partner spends on their hobbies, they need to find their grown-up pants and have an adult conversation. Scarred Cerebrum chimes in, yes, this. People who aren't mature enough to have an honest conversation with their partner are people who aren't mature enough to have a relationship in the first place. If you can't express to your partner that something bothers you in the relationship, then you should stick to screw buddies. But as others have already pointed out, cheaters cheat because they want to cheat. Things like,
He spends too much time on video games.
are just a convenient stick to beat the dog with. Lord Kano chimes in, cheaters will always find a way to justify their cheating. If you hadn't been playing video games and spent every spare waking moment at her side, the excuse would have been that you were smothering her. Director 20530 says, if she had an issue with your gaming, she should have had a conversation with you about it. I suspect she used your hobby to hide her cheating. RayP54 says, probably used the huge amount of hours he was away working for his family to do it. The OP replies, yep, My situation is a bit different because the affair partners were friends of ours, so I trusted them and didn't have a problem with her spending a lot of time with them. Boy, was I wrong. All three of them were concocting lies and gaslighting. Makes me sick to my stomach to remember the lies they told. Here's a thorough thought from I Can't Be Bored. The decision to cheat was on your wife's. The blame for that does fall on her shoulders, 100%. However, gaming addiction is real, and it does warp how you see things. My dear husband has ADHD and an addictive personality. I do not know if you also have these issues, just trying to offer a different, calm explanation. My husband would play video games for hours and hours on end. In his mind, he genuinely thought he wasn't playing that much. He thought he had a good balance between real life and his gaming. When I'd complain, he didn't hear that I was asking for time. What he heard was judgment for playing video games at all. No matter how much I tried to discuss it with him, he couldn't see what was happening. We tried timers. We agreed on, say, 2 hours. At 2 hours, he'd work towards a save zone or whatever. An hour later, sometimes 2, he'd be done and go to bed. His whole evening was video games, but he'd swear he played for 2 hours. There was no sense of time, and it took a huge toll. It led to arguing and me considering leaving. Actually, due to this and his mother being over-involved, we separated for 6 months. But it'd be another 10 years, an affair on his part. I just don't want him to enjoy his time and hate the video games, and she understood. And facing the addictions and ADHD to beat it. When I hear someone say that the problem with their gaming is their partner, I always want to ask certain questions, because I don't think that people realize what a time suck they are. How a bad night of gaming can lead to a bad night for the whole house. As for her staying home, what happened when you got home? She spent all of the hours you were at work working as well. When you got home, did you split things 50-50? Or did you expect her to continue to pull all of the weight while you game, scroll, relax? Did you give her real time to decompress? Or did you consider her shower or groceries her me time? I don't think you are ready to admit that the stigma is based in truth. There are countless wives on this app trying to get support and understanding about this issue, probably spouses of all kinds. We are not quiet about the damage it is causing, but when the people exhibiting the damaging behavior refuse to look at the bigger picture, it's easier to label it a stigma. It's easier to say your spouse is just a big ol' meanie than it is to look inward, to set timers and examine your behavior. Do your games influence your mood? Do you lose track of time? One day, you'll want to have another relationship. If you don't want these issues to pop up again, then it may be time to make sure that you aren't going to potentially doom because of video games. Your wife should not have cheated. There isn't an excuse for that. However, I hope that you can take this long-ass paragraph for what it is. A view from the other side of this coin, from someone who has been there and dealt with this on the other side. Please consider what video gaming can become and how it can affect the rest of your household. Me and Amor says, there is no justification for cheating. That said, my husband and I don't have children, but I definitely did check out of the marriage before or during the time my husband cheated. It was the beginning of 2020 and I got so wrapped up in all of the terrible crap happening in the world that I spent hours after work on my phone obsessing over the news and trying to numb my brain with happy content the rest of the time. I was also working full-time and contributing my share of the housework, but I had no energy left over to spend quality time. We weren't going anywhere due to the pandemic, so arguably, it was the most time we'd ever spent together in quantity, but it was not quality. We didn't really talk anymore. I stopped trying to woo him. Sex decreased to 2 to 3 times monthly. I understand why he felt neglected and looked elsewhere for attention. But it still doesn't justify it. He didn't talk to me about the problems he was having with us. If he would have communicated, if he would have said, I can't keep on with this relationship if things don't change, I swear I would have worked on myself and reconnecting. I forgot where I was going with this, but I guess my point is that anything can be a big enough distraction to ruin a relationship if you let it. Hobbies are important, no matter what that hobby may be, but balance is necessary and the amount of time spent with partners doesn't matter as long as it's quality time in which they have your whole attention and you are discussing more intimate matters than to-do lists, work, and errands. And our last comment from ChampKind21. My ex did this too, OP. I would come home and eat dinner with her and her kids, spend time with the girls, and then watch shows with her when the kids were in bed. When she began to get sleepy next to me on the couch, I figured that was as good a time as any to play, right? Nope. Apparently, I was supposed to go to bed at the same time as her and give up on having that relaxing me time of gaming. I neglected none of my responsibilities, and she knew I gamed before we began dating. She still brought it up as justification for the cheating, but had never discussed to me her negative opinion of me playing. Keep in mind, my brother lived over 1,000 miles away, and this was how we hung out and bonded. Cheaters are going to cheat, OP, and more importantly, they will change the history of your relationship to justify it. We all made mistakes in our relationships, but we are the blameless of their cheating.